Broadcasting from my car, we are Recovered. Well, welcome, Recovered listeners, and welcome to the Recovered Podcast and this special episode as we're on the road. And today I'm joined with Michael Weinberger. Michael, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Mark?
It's great to have you. Now, listeners, Michael is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and Michael has successfully navigated his busy life with unparalleled optimism. And I think you'll get a feel for that with this interview. But like many of our Recovered Podcast listeners, Michael navigates life with plenty of obstacles and challenges. And really, Michael, that is the subject of today's episode. Michael has battled bipolar depression and an eating disorder. Through Michael's life experience, he has developed some coping skills that he'd like to share with our Recovered Podcast listeners, with you, our valued listener. So, Michael, welcome to the studio. Welcome to the Recovered Podcast.
Mark, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Why don't you give us your information, your background?
Very good, Mark. Thank you. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1994. I was 17 years old, and I was just out of control. I went in and I was actually diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and their immediate solution for attention deficit disorder is Ritalin. And so Ritalin is the poor man's cocaine. And for somebody that suffers with mania and impulsive behavior, the last thing I needed was stimulants. And so I'm now given stimulants, and I'm all over the place, basically getting thrown out of high school, or uncontrolled in high school. And so I now go on a 22-year journey of trying to find the right medication, the right therapy, the right model for managing my life.
Okay, so you're in high school and you've been diagnosed and you've been given medication. Up to this point, are you struggling? Are you fitting in, or do you feel like you're somehow outside the herd?
I'm definitely struggling. I have rage and anger issues. I have impulsive behavior issues. So when we started drinking early in high school, everyone they would send me out to get the alcohol for the party, and I'd buy enough alcohol for 50 people for a 4-person barbecue.
All right. So you get through high school, but you're on this 22-year journey, like you said. Walk us through it.
So I get out of high school. It takes me 3.5 years to graduate college. It takes me 4 total physical years. It takes me 4 colleges. I end up getting expelled from 2 of them with behavior issues, and it was drinking, drugs, all sorts of different addictive type behavior.
And yet somewhat successful. I mean, you navigated this stuff and graduated.
So I was thrown out of college with a 3.9 and sent home. And as the dean is looking at me, she's just baffled, bewildered by my inability to control myself and still maintain an academic success. Once getting home, I had an extremely supportive mother. That mother, basically the quick deal is, I call her about 6 weeks before the end of a semester. I said, "Mom, I'm going to need you to come pick me up." And she said, "Well, the semester's almost over. I'll come pick you up when you're done." I said, "Well, actually, I've just been evicted from the dorm, and the police are here, so I'm homeless, and all my stuff's sitting on the front step of the dorm. I need to go home now." And I said, "On top of that, I'm not willing to talk about any of these issues. So when you get here, we're going to sit in silence all the way home, and I'm never talking about it."
And what did she do?
She sat in silence.
We might call that codependency, but okay, you can call it supportive.
I get home, and I get to go to sleep that night. And when I wake up the next morning, my mother comes in, and she says, "Listen, I don't care if you graduate college at this point. I don't care what you're going to do. This is what I know. You are not going to just stay here and do nothing. So get up, get a job, get on with your life, and start moving. That's the most important aspect here." And at this point, it's 3.5 years after my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I'm not really sure how to manage. I'm taking my meds. the most inefficient way possible. If I had drank the night before, I would not take my meds the next day. So I'm taking meds that are prescribed for 7 days a week, 2 days a week at best. And the 2 days that I'm taking them, I'm kind of overdosing on them to try and catch up for the time when I don't have them.
Are you getting therapy at this time, or are you simply relying on the chemicals?
So I'm in and out of therapy. I have psychiatrists, I have psychologists, I have family and friends. The one thing that was missing from my life, I didn't have a support group. I didn't have peer support. I didn't have support groups available to me. I didn't really know what my problem was. Was my problem my diagnosis? Was my problem my impulsive and addictive behavior? Was my problem later to turn out to be food? I didn't know, and so I didn't know where to turn. I'm spending, during this kind of discovery period, I end up getting back into college and finishing up. I graduated college, Rutgers University, in 1999. During the past year, the last year of Rutgers University, I was probably picked up by the police or thrown in a hospital a dozen times. I would get home at night and I'd call the police station the next day to find out if they had my license, because I didn't know. I said, I think I might have been there. Yes, you were arrested, sir. So you can come down and pick up your license. And so I went ahead and did that. So it was a tumultuous year. I was overdosing with suicidal ideations and suicide attempts. I don't feel that I ever truly wanted to kill myself. I was more interested in slowing the racing thoughts in my head. I had so many fears and worries and anxieties. I was hopeless. And everyone else no one else seemed to have any problems. And I didn't understand why everyone else got away easy and was able to do things that I wasn't able to do.
We would call that judging your outsides with my insides. Everybody sometimes has turmoil going on inside, and it's so difficult to accept that other people seem to be navigating life fine. So it sounds to me like you're getting close to your bottom as it comes to your mental illness and your behavior issues. How does the eating disorder play at this point?
So I graduate college, and I'm probably 230 pounds. And I get my first job, and I'm working like a maniac. I'm working 20 hours a day, every day of the week. And within about 6 months, I put on 100 pounds. And so I never looked at that as odd. I figured everyone does that. So I'm just doing the normal behavior of everyone. This is where kind of the mania takes over. It's 1999, 2000. I'm working 20 hours a week. My boss and company unintentionally are taking advantage of the fact that I have a mood disorder, mental illness diagnosis. And I go out and I buy my first house. I buy a condo in 2001. I then, within 10 days of closing and purchasing the house, I quit my job and decide that I'm going to start a new company. Then I find a partner, and I start a new company in 2001, and by the end of the year, I've lost everything financially. I have $0 in the bank. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pay my next bill. And I go and work a deal with a business partner in Chicago, and I tell him the only way I can make this work is if I get paid my entire salary up front. And because I am impulsive and need to solve problems, I talked my way into it. And I had spent my entire life solving problems by, this can't possibly fail, so I'm going to just make this happen. And so I receive a check, and I find myself relocating from New Jersey in about 2002 to Michigan. I moved to Michigan, and I don't tell anybody. My family continues to invite me for dinners every weekend and want me to participate in the family activities. And finally, by late fall, I let them know, guys, I'm actually a permanent resident of Michigan. I don't live in New Jersey anymore. I just upped and moved, figuring relocating obviously was going to solve all of my problems. Unfortunately, I followed myself here and woke up with the same exact set of problems. And so in order to continue to solve problems, I was great at masquerading my own issues, and I was really good at finding distractions to keep myself from realizing I had any issues. So I moved to Michigan. That should have fixed my problems.
We call that a geographic cure.
Right.
How'd that work?
It failed terribly. And so as the geographic cure is failing, I gained another 60 pounds. And I get engaged to someone that I met in the elevator within 10 days of moving to Michigan. Because within 10 days, I realized that my geographic cure was failing, and I better come up with something new to distract me from dealing with my issues. I get married 1 year to the day of moving to Michigan, and it was just a terrible mistake. It was just another distraction. I would have been better off finding a recovery. I would have been better off reading a book. I would have been better off doing anything but what I ended up doing. And so I'm married, and it's now 2005. My life is still out of control. I've moved a couple times while living in Michigan. My marriage is falling apart. And in 2006, my mother-in-law comes to me and asks if I can meet her on a Saturday morning. And I meet her on a Saturday morning, and at that point, she wants me to meet her for breakfast. I was so into my illness, into food addiction at that time, that I met her for breakfast and had another meal of pancakes and a couple chocolate milks. I mean, at this point, I'm probably 15,000 calories deep into the day, and it's 11 a.m. And I'm in sweatpants, and I can't fit into the booth, so I'm sitting sideways trying to make it not obvious that that's the biggest pain in my life. And my mother-in-law slides the big book across the table to me and slides the 12 and 12 across the table to me and says, food addiction is real. You might have a problem. Take a look at these books.
Now, is your mother-in-law in recovery? I mean, how did she know to pass those two books over to you?
So at that point, my mother-in-law was in Overeaters Anonymous for 30 years. She was maintaining over 100-pound weight loss for 30 years. And she was a very spiritual person. And she was, I would say she was in recovery.
I'm going to go off topic a little bit here. I can see why your wife at that time was attracted to you, because it was part of who she was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, my wife, ironically enough, my wife was a psychologist, and she dealt with individuals that had food addiction. And she marries me. I mean, you could have pegged that. We didn't even need to see each other. We could have just met down the aisle. So she slides the books across the table to me, and I go home, and at that point I was still fairly rageful. I was unmedicated for my bipolar disorder. And my wife says to me, my wife just actually doesn't say anything. She just kind of looks stunned, wondering if I'm now just going to throw away the marriage and lose my mind over this behavior of her mother's. Or was I going to embrace it and go with the change? And I just said, I'm kind of stunned. I don't know what to do. I did not know how to react. And so I started reading the books. And this was probably December-ish of 2005. And in January of 2006, at this point, I had a lot of physical illness. I had a lot of intestinal problems. I had a lot of GI issues because I was eating 10,000 plus calories a day. I was drinking. I was not on medication for anything, and the medications I was taking were not consistent. And I go to a doctor in January of 2006. And so at that point, he says to me, you should be dead in 3 or 4 years. You have early stage liver disease. Your liver should be solid by the end of this year.
Let me ask you this. I mean, your mother-in-law slid over those two books. I mean, did you enter into any sort of recovery formally?
So it would have been January 22nd, I went to my first Overeaters Anonymous meeting. And I go there and I just sit absolutely stunned because I'm now surrounded by 10 people and every single one of them has my problem. And we start reading publicly and I'm kind of baffled and confused. And, one of the women says to me, hey, got to go to another meeting. And so I go to another meeting. And this is on a Thursday evening at Beaumont Hospital. And they said, there's another meeting on Saturday. And I go to the meeting on Saturday morning, and there's 40 people. And I share what the doctor had shared with me. And I'm kind of stunned and baffled. I think I spent enough time in therapy to just immediately be able to share whatever is on my mind. There was no barrier to my share. And at the end of the meeting, a woman comes up to me, and she hugs me. And she says, let me love you until you can love yourself. And I was blown away by that day, by that experience. And then I started to hear things in the rooms like, 90 and 90 and immerse yourself in the program. And at this point, I'm also dealing with bipolar disorder. And so I don't know what to do. To backtrack quickly, I go to the doctor. He says, you're going to be dead or lose 100 pounds. And so this is January of 2006. And so I go to these meetings, and immediately there's hope, and there's recovery, and there's a task at hand. And so I do what any rational, manic person does. I do 90 and 45. Why wait for the 90? I mean, I could get done more than not. And so just like the geographic transfer, my marriage was failing. I was miserable. I might as well give myself a task to do. So I go to 2 meetings a day, every day of the week, period. It doesn't matter. I leave birthday parties. I leave holidays. I'm out. I have to be at my meetings.
So we might call that a dry drunk, Michael, someone that is certainly active in the fellowship and is able to not drink, but secondary recovery, that is our relationships with others, the way we feel about ourselves inside, all of those remain stifled. Is that something you can identify with?
Absolutely. I've actually recently been reflecting. My marriage is failing. My company is failing. I'm having inappropriate relationships and behaviors and gambling, but I'm losing weight. And I've memorized the big book, so I must be in recovery. And I've just come to the realization in working with someone in program that's where I was. And the amazing part is, and this is a little bit a sidestep, but that individual ends up getting into recovery. And he sends me a text after this revelation a couple weeks ago. He says, well, this guy, you had what this guy wanted. He's now in recovery for 7 years. And so it's just funny that that's how I was presenting. I was presenting as someone that had their stuff together, but I did not.
Well, over the time, Michael, I know you've developed some tools to help you cope and to bring back some peace and serenity into your life. Let's talk about some of those things, the solution.
Absolutely, Mark. In terms of, I needed a tool that was available to me outside of the 12-step meetings, outside of my support group meetings, outside of my therapy appointments, outside just when I was alone and what I needed to do. I created a website called aplanforliving.com. It is an app that is free or has a paid version for $2 a month. The purpose of the app is to help me through difficult times. And so I created the app with one purpose. If it benefited me, I succeeded. So I didn't have this unrealistic expectation of having to build something that's going to be an amazing success. It helps me every day. I succeeded. I'm now simply telling everybody how that works for me.
So let's talk about some of the tools. Let's talk about what this app does, some of the features of it. What can some of our listeners tap into?
Sure. So the basis of the app is that everybody has difficulty at some point. whether it's financial difficulty, relationships, mental health, divorce, education, weight loss. Everybody's going to have problems at some point. And it's not that everyone needs a diagnosis. And that's not necessarily just a medical diagnosis, a self-diagnosis of alcoholism or drug addiction, any diagnosis. The current solutions that are out there, many of them have stigmas associated with them. So people might be scared to come to the 12-step meetings because they don't want to be seen, even though it's an anonymous program. They might not want to be seen in the parking lot walking up there.
So many of our listeners, Michael, express that they'll come to the podcast just with that fear. They've even made it as far as the parking lot. But that big step, that long journey, that 50 feet into the door is such a big barrier. And so they'll listen to the podcast and they wait for encouragement. And sometimes they do get that encouragement to come in. So you're offering a similar thing with your app.
Absolutely. The ability to have a tool that's available at all times, when you're in crisis and when you're not in crisis, when you're learning how to communicate with yourself. The biggest issue I found in my life was, as I mentioned earlier, I put up every distraction and masquerade possible to prevent myself from dealing with my issues. And so the app is designed to start this basic conversation with yourself, right? It's not necessarily important that you come to a meeting at first and proclaim your addiction. Sometimes it's just important for you to say in your own room, I have a problem with alcohol. I have an addiction. I work with people on a regular basis, and a lot of people are getting divorced lately. And sometimes I said, it's okay if you say it. And they're like, say what? I said, are you getting divorced? Yeah. I said, well, how about you just say, I'm getting divorced. I'm getting divorced. I said, you know what? Big deal. It's just a fact. It doesn't define who you are. It doesn't make you who you are. It's something that's happening to you. And so when I look at these traditional solutions that are offered, therapy, support groups, friends and family, all of them not only come with stigma, a lot of them might come with judgment. And so someone that suffers with a mental illness and addiction, I feel in my mind, there's only so many times my friends and family want to listen to me falling off the wagon again, seeing me gain 150 pounds again, seeing me feel suicidal again. And so the tool is there for you to start learning who you are.
So let's talk about this app. Let's talk about the features that are available and where you can find it is aplanforliving.com. So what are some of the features? Walk us through it.
So some of the features, the biggest issue I found and how I was ingrained growing up is when I start my day, I need to put myself into a better position. Many people decide how they're going to feel from the comfort of their own bed. That doesn't work. Everyone feels lousy from the comfort of their own bed. No one wants to get up, I would say. The app starts by asking you, how happy are you? It's just a simple twist on how are you feeling, but it allows you to now, well, how am I doing? It then has 3 components, a gratitude list. I've learned in program, I've learned in recovery, I've learned in therapy that if you can get outside yourself and come up with a formal list of what you're grateful for, you are able to start to rewire your brain to work and succeed in life. And so rather than focusing on, oh my God, I have all these bills to pay, this upcoming, anything negative, it's really pretty easy to come up with. And it's funny that I'm struggling coming up with a list of negative things. I wake up every day with 20 items on my gratitude list. And once the gratitude list is complete, it moves into a spirituality function. And so spirituality might mean prayer. It might mean thoughts. It might mean intentions. It might mean wishes. It might mean talking to our higher power and just getting out there. It might mean the chair in front of you that you're just going to let make decisions for you today. And so once you come up with your thought list or prayer list, it allows you to continue to get outside yourself. The biggest issue I found in recovery, the biggest issue I found in managing and dealing with my mental illness was that my brain was telling me a story that was not real. The more I stayed inside my brain, listening to this false reality continually present itself, like I'm a failure, I'm never going to get this job, I'm never going to find a spouse, my kids hate me, I have a lousy car, I don't make enough money. That's a story that will make anyone feel terrible. But if you're able to get up and say, hey, my wife has back pain, I hope she does better. My neighbor's dog is barking, I hope my neighbor can fix that. It just gives you, it gives you a level of humility for you to remember you're not in charge of anything. And so once you create these two things, the final piece is a mindfulness list. I call it experiences. The biggest problem I've had in my life is that I've always believed that feelings were facts, and that I needed an immediate reaction and response to everything in my life. And so if I got an upsetting email from a client, I needed to respond immediately. If my wife called me and left me a voicemail, I needed to listen to it right now. If everything needed to be solved in the moment. What I've learned, nothing truly needs to be solved in the moment. For me. I'm not a doctor. I'm in technology. No one's going to die if I take a few minutes to respond. And I found when I introduce that level of, I've experienced an upsetting email, and I spend 2 minutes before I respond more intelligently. I respond with facts. I am able to then process it and move on. And so previously, I'd get an upsetting email from my client. I'd go get a drink. I'd go overeat. It would blow my mind. I can give you a quick aside from this with experiences. I was at a friend's house on a Sunday night for dinner, and I get an email that says, I'm firing you. For any entrepreneur, your heart sinks, you're racing, you are fired. And so for someone with bipolar disorder and addiction in my mind, my immediately thought is, I'm not going to be able to pay any of my bills on Monday.
We catastrophize. We go right to that disaster ending. But certainly that's very disturbing. I can identify with that even just as you speak. My heart races a little bit.
Well, Mark, thank you. Now I'm able to say, okay, well, that email didn't change my bank balances. That email didn't change my 200 other clients. It was one event in time. And not only did it not require an immediate response, it didn't require me to overeat at dinner. It didn't require me to overdose at night. It didn't require me to do anything. What did it require me to do? I actually looked at my gratitude list. And I'm so grateful I have 2 healthy kids, and I'm in a second marriage that is incredible, that I have a business partner and a support system that is out there for me, that my level of happiness, my level of peace and acceptance increased because I got the upsetting email and it was done.
So as I understand it, Michael, the components of gratitude, mindfulness, and your spirituality portion, this is your happiness formula, right? That's what you refer to it as at the website, aplanforaliving.com. Now, how do our listeners get this app?
So right now it is it's an app that's available through the website. If you click on the sign up.
Again, what's the website?
The website is aplanforaliving.com. If you visit the website, there's a sign up link. And there are 3 plans available. Basically, there's a free plan which gives you all of the functionality I've described here. It includes tips and tricks. It includes goal setting. It includes challenges. It includes setting your own targets, and so you could measure yourself only against yourself. There's a paid version for $2 a month, which gives you the ability to customize notifications. It will send medication reminders if you need to take medications. It will send out reminders to remind you to be mindful. I find even as the creator of the app, sometimes it's the end of the day and I haven't even thought about it. And those are the days that not only do I come home more agitated, I'm distracted. The days that I'm able to simply take 2 minutes out of my day to record it, I'm able to be at better peace with myself.
All right, Michael, I really appreciate you joining us today and telling us your story and presenting some options to our listeners. I'm all for tools to help our listeners. So again, if you're interested, go to aplanforliving.com and check out what they've got there. So remember, abandon yourself to God and admit your faults. Clear away the records of the past and give freely. God bless, and see you next time.